I'm here with Teresa Mosqueda, candidate for position 8, Seattle City Council. Thanks so much for coming down today.
For having me.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you here. As you are aware, you're here to interview for position 8 with the workers of the City of Seattle. And this is our first year doing full candidate endorsements. And so today you'll be applying for a job with the workers in the city. We'll be rating you in 3 categories at the end of this interview. 1, ratings from our members. 2, issues, and you filled out a questionnaire with us, which is great, a job application. And 3, your background and experience. So today's interview is going to be streamed, and you're gonna, the workers in the city are gonna get to take a look at it, and we're gonna tell the entire city sort of what we think about your positions on workers' issues. Each of your questions you'll get 3 minutes to respond to, and congratulations, you're down to our final 2 candidates for this position. I'm sure you did some homework. It looks like you have some materials in front of you, so I'll give you a brief background on who we are and sort of what we're looking for a candidate for this position. Our mission is to build a powerful workers movement that can dramatically improve wages and working conditions and change the local and national conversation about wealth, inequality, and the value of work. We launched in 2011 and since then have grown to over 100,000 workers in our base. We've also worked on a number of campaigns and had some major victories, including a campaign with Amazon where warehouse workers now have air conditioners installed in their warehouses, and Amazon pledged to drop out of ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. You might have heard about the CTAC 15 in Seattle. 15
Definitely
campaign.
heard about that, yes.
I think you might have worked on some of that with us too. We won secure scheduling, the nation's strongest policy last year, and of course the statewide minimum wage, which you took a strong leadership position in paid family this year, and we're still going strong. So we're looking for a candidate in position 8 who's going to help us continue on with these victories and make sure that workers are protected. So we're going to get into these questions right now. The first question is, imagine you're knocking on my door, a thing that I'm sure you've done a lot of during this campaign on various doors. How would you make the case about why you are the best choice for workers in the city? Hi.
Hi, Sejal?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Teresa Mosqueda. Nice to meet you.
Oh, so nice to meet you.
I think we may have met before when we were working on the campaign to raise the minimum wage in Seattle to $15 an hour.
That's right. That's exciting.
Yes, congratulations on that huge win and so many others. Actually, that's part of the reason I'm at your door today. I came out and decided to run for Seattle City Council really on the heels of Trump winning this election, because I want to continue the wins that we've seen here in Seattle. Secure scheduling, paid family leave, sick leave, protecting workers from retaliation. These are issues that we're passionate about. I know you're passionate about them, and I'm terrified about the Trump administration trying to rip away workers' rights. Go after the LGBTQ community. Go after women in our healthcare. Try to do everything they can to create greater economic insecurity. That's all the issues we fought against, and we are winning in Seattle, but we have to have people in Seattle City Council that know how to work together, that will bring people together from the community and pass good policy and make sure that we protect the issues that we fought so hard to win. I'm running for Seattle City Council this year to hopefully be a voice from the community, to be a voice for workers, to be a voice for retirees and children's advocates, to sit on City Council, to stand up for our rights right now in a time of the Trump administration trying to rip away those rights, and also to bring my background in public health and worker advocacy to Seattle City Council. You know, if you look around Seattle, I think we see a lot of prosperity, but we don't see a lot of shared prosperity. And the issues that we're seeing in terms of lack of affordable housing for workers, for the lowest income folks, for folks in the middle income, it's a public health crisis. When you look at the number of folks who cannot afford to live in our city, are getting pushed out, and in fact getting pushed out of our city limits or getting pushed to the streets, that is a public health crisis. I want to be there with my background in economic justice issues and in public health to address these issues as the true crises that they are and make sure that our voice, the community voice, is heard in City Council. Does that sound like a good idea to you?
Those all sound like great ideas to me.
Well, I would love to work with you. I am working with the Democracy Voucher Program. In fact, the vast majority of money that we've raised from this campaign, about 75–80% of the funds that we've raised, have come directly from the Democracy Voucher Program. That means I am not beholden to corporations. That means community movement, and it means that we are going to be engaging people who've been kind of cut out from politics and our election process in the past. So that's why I'm out here. I want to win this November.
I got a lot of candidates now.
I do. But I also want to make sure that we win in November. So I'd love to work with you and have your vote on November 7th.
Well, I'll tell you what, Teresa, the person who gets Working Washington's endorsement will most likely get my vote this November.
Thank you.
It's interesting that you talked about how prosperous the city is and the shared prosperity, sort of the distribution of prosperity. We recently heard about Amazon's announcement that they plan on opening a second headquarters, potentially outside of the city of Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
What are your ideas for how the city can maximize innovation while also protecting and expanding workers' rights?
So I think we have a good example of what it means to have greater shared prosperity in Seattle when we look at what we've done on minimum wage, what we've done on sick leave, secure scheduling, These are all issues where if we invest in workers, then we know businesses do well. This is a false dichotomy to be saying that if you don't invest in businesses, then you're not investing in workers. So I think what we need to be doing is breaking down the misperceptions that if somehow you're a pro-worker advocate, then you're not friendly to business. In fact, what we did on minimum wage and sick leave is we said that when we increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour, or in the state level, $13.50, workers will actually have another $600 in their pocket per month to spend in local economies, to put food on the table, to make sure that their kiddos have the clothing that they need for school. That is good for business. So what I'd like to do on City Council is stop with this false perception that when we are friendly to workers, we're somehow turning our back on business. In fact, when we're good to workers, it's good for businesses. So as a City Council person, I want to see us create smart development, create actual social equity impact statements where we hold developers and large corporations accountable when they come into the city. I want to see the benefit that they're bringing back, investments in roads, investments in sidewalks, investments in our schools, and also to recognize that they're going to do better when workers do better. So we need to all get on the same page and lift workers up, get them out of poverty, and make sure that more of us can afford to live in the city that we work, and more of us can afford to stay in the city that we work so we can retire here. That's what we're talking about.
I mean, it's interesting that you're talking about what you would do as a city council member. As a city council member, what would you think is your most important job responsibility?
The most important job responsibility, I think, is to make sure that we're investing in individuals, families, and communities. If you look at everything that the city does through the lens of a public health advocate, when communities don't have sidewalks and our kiddos are having to walk on the streets next to fast-going lanes with potholes and it's raining and your kid shows up at school drenched and don't feel respected or invested in, they're not ready to learn. I think the city's responsibility is to invest in everything from the basic infrastructure that we need so that our community has equitable investments from north to south end. We need sidewalks and safe routes, but also we need from north to south end investments in good living wage jobs, access to education, making sure that people feel respected. So the ways that I would promote that is, number one, I have been calling for the city of Seattle to be able to look what's going on in New York and San Francisco and say that everyone here should have the opportunity to go to higher education. We should be able to have at least 2, if not 4 years of free college tuition so that people have the opportunity and hope to go on to higher education and then be able to stay in the city and be able to afford to live here. Number 2, if you look at what the city has in terms of our families in our city, what they have to pay for childcare right now, it is crippling. We do not create economic security by asking our families to spend more each year on childcare than sometimes they have to pay on their own rent or mortgage. In fact, it's more expensive to send your kiddo to childcare for a year than it is to go to the University of Washington for a year. That is not how we create equity. And the city of Seattle has the most expensive childcare in the entire country. I have a proposal that would say that no family in the city of Seattle would have to spend more than 10% of their income on childcare. We said that on healthcare. And in fact, we said if you're low income, you shouldn't actually have to pay anything. So I want a sliding scale, but no family should have to pay more than 10% of their income on healthcare, on childcare. And if you look at the folks who are providing the childcare in our community, it's mostly women and mostly communities of color. And you look at the fact that childcare workers make less on average to watch our kiddos than those who actually work in parking lots to watch our cars. That is not right. It is a gender injustice issue, a social injustice issue, and I think we can create the opportunities in Seattle to make sure that everybody has the ability to have affordable childcare. And lastly, in terms of the ability to live in our city, housing is so damn expensive. I'm a renter. I would be the only renter on city council right now. The only person who's looked at trying to see what it would look like to buy my first home in this type of market. And let me tell you, I feel like I make a good middle income wage. For so many of us and folks who make less, it is unattainable right now to have a home. So we need affordable housing throughout the city for folks in the low income and middle income so that we can afford to stay here. The people who are getting pushed out of this community are mostly lower income folks and communities of color, and most of us are more transit reliant. It is inequitable that we're pushing folks out of this community. I want affordable housing in the city, and that's what I'll be working to champion.
There's a lot in there, and I think I want to unpack a few of those. You know, as a person who is expecting a child shortly, I'm
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I'm well aware of the childcare costs in the city, and I'm also glad that you talked about sort of the other piece of this, which is the workers who are providing support. You know, domestic workers, including nannies. Of course, I've been organizing with Working Washington for a while now, and recently both candidates for mayor came out and announced their support for domestic workers and for a Bill of Rights for domestic workers. What ideas do you have about how the city can ensure domestic workers are able to both, you know, attain sort of good jobs, build organization, and raise standards?
So I've been actually working with folks like Casa Latina for the past 7 to 8 years on bills that we could have introduced at the state level, and would be happy to work with Working Washington, Casa Latina, and other community partners to champion efforts at the city level, because we've seen so many times with leadership from workers in Working Washington that when we push policies here in Seattle, we actually see wins statewide. In terms of making sure that domestic workers and so many others who are sort of in non-traditional work areas, we have got to make sure that folks have the ability to speak up, have the right to collectively bargain, be able to have a domestic workers bill of rights so that people have their rights and know where to go. Right now, if people experience wage theft, retaliation, harassment on the job, what recourse do we really have? The state has had diminishing resources going into investigation and claims, but we are beginning to make some great strides here in Seattle, a lot of it due to the workers in Working Washington and our partners to create the Office of Labor Standards. I sat there with you and others for the better part of a year to help create the Office of Labor Standards, because we knew we had to take matters into our own hands to make sure that folks like Working Washington and the Fair Work Center, Casa Latina, and so many others who work directly with workers can help initiate claims, can help the director look at company-wide investigations that need to happen. And I think that with the strides that we've made with Office of Labor Standards and putting together a domestic workers' bill of rights, getting it introduced, and not just being there when the cameras are there when it passes, but being there after the ink is dry to make sure it actually works, and that OLS has the resources necessary to make sure that all workers in non-traditional sectors are able to have their rights protected, we can make some real wins. I would also want to say that, you know, this is an area that I would love to help champion with you and with Working Washington. Prior to the recession, we saw a lot of the jobs that went away after the recession be in middle to high income wages. And after the recession, we saw the majority of jobs that came back were in service sector jobs. Domestic workers are absolutely in that category, and so we have to figure out how we provide rights, resources, and I would say community partners, in addition to champions in City Hall, who will be there to make sure that all workers, especially workers who are in lower wage industries, have their rights protected. It's something that I've worked on at the state level. It's something I would love to work with you on at the city level. And this is an area where if we want Seattle to truly be a place where it is a city for everyone, we have to invest in workers' rights.
And then going back to your first point around higher education, we all know that higher education is extremely expensive. I think we also know that you can't educate your way out of the low wage jobs that are being created, you know, since the recession and with, you know, some of the emerging economy. If you could magically pass one piece of legislation, and only one, that would benefit workers, what would it be and why?
Okay, one piece of legislation to help address lifting workers out of poverty and recognizing it's not just about education. Is that what you're saying?
One piece of legislation that would benefit workers.
Okay. I will absolutely go back to talk about the child care bill that I have, because this is about workers' rights and making sure that more folks can have access to a good living wage jobs as child care providers. Again, seeing it as a gender justice and racial justice issue, we have got to figure out a way that the city can help supplement the wages that some of our most important workers are making in the city to take care of our kiddos, to help raise our kiddos. So the piece of legislation that I'm envisioning related to childcare would say that we are going to invest in creating a pipeline for workers so that they can get in, get the accreditation necessary to be childcare providers that are recognized in the city, to then supplement the cost that they make in terms of wages so that people can actually make a living wage as childcare providers in the city. And then number 3, work at the city and the state level to make sure that more folks can see themselves as childcare providers. Did you know that you have to have 35 square feet inside and 75 square feet outside per child if you want to open your own childcare facility? So think about that. How many folks in the city right now are able to buy their own huge home with a white picket fence and open up their own childcare facility? You have to be pretty much independently wealthy at this point in Seattle to do that. We have to figure out regulations that allow for more people to have their community-based childcare facilities, have it be recognized by the city, and then supplement those wages and respect the workers as the true professionals that they are in early learning. That's the proposal that I have. It will help the workers who actually do the job of caring for our kiddos, and it will help us who need to go back and want to go back into the workforce so that we're not having our entire budgets drained by childcare. If I could just say one more thing on this. I think it's a really personal issue, as you mentioned, for everybody who has their own child and has dealt with the cost of it. And it sounds like you're doing your own research as well. My sister, she just had her second kiddo. She has a 4-year-old and a 4-month-old. And she just told me now that she's gone back to work, her annual salary is $4,000 after she pays for childcare for the 2 of them. This is an economic justice issue. It is a worker justice issue, and I will help champion this, which I think will help every worker in the city of Seattle.
$4,000, not a lot of money.
Not a lot of money.
So, you're interviewing for position 8, city council member. But besides this job as position 8, what's your dream job?
So my dream job, I feel like, is what we're doing right now. And I see what
Being interviewed by me?
being interviewed by you, I mean, helping to be held accountable to the members of Working Washington. What I do right now is work with community partners, work with labor partners, work with small businesses in the faith community to stand up for workers' rights. I've been there with Working Washington to help walk fast food workers back to the strike after a strike line, after a 1-day strike, and been there to hold employers accountable to say you will not retaliate against these workers for taking their legal action to stand up for their workers' rights. I have been there on strike lines. Just the other day I was down in South Seattle with Teamsters who were saying we are going to be invested in as the true professionals that we are. And I see the work of City Council to be standing up for the rights of every worker, all of our communities, our smallest businesses throughout Seattle as well. I feel like I had to grapple with whether or not it was the right decision to step forward and run for office. And then I realized I am not leaving the labor movement. This is an extension of my commitment to workers, to be able to sit on city council and be there as a voice with the community, not for, but with community. So in my view, hopefully if I win this seat, could be an extension of the job that I truly love, which is standing up every single day, fighting for retirement security, fighting for workers' rights, fighting for economic justice, gender justice issues. And with a background in health policy, the reason I do this is because you can't be healthy if you don't have a good living wage. You can't be healthy if you don't have housing security. You can't be healthy if you're being retaliated against at your workplace or you constantly fear losing your job. So for me, this is about creating healthy communities, and I'll be there. I'll still be out on the strike lines. You can count on me. But I also want to sign on the dotted line to pass good policies that protect workers' rights. And I think we all benefit, both in terms of our health and our community, when we do that.
We have it recorded, so if we have another strike, we'll expect you right there.
I will be there. I got my bullhorn in the car. Since the election, it's been there full time.
Well, this is an interview, and we've heard a lot of exciting ideas from you and why you would be a great candidate for position A, why you are a great candidate for position A, why you would be a great city council member. What would you anticipate would be your biggest challenge as a member of city council?
Well, as I put in the questionnaire, and I think this is very true, having been in meetings with me, you and Working Washington members know well, I like to get into the weeds. I like to get into the policy details. I talk in my questionnaire about wanting to always bring around my pie chart, and that's quite literally what I tried to do.
I have seen you bring pie charts.
Yes. When I was asked why I wanted to run for Seattle City Council, I put together a 6-page document that had a pie chart of the social determinants of health. And it talks about how if we want healthy communities, having access to a health insurance plastic medical card in our hip pocket is about 10% of what makes us healthy. What actually makes us healthy as a community is having good jobs, having housing, having investments and respect in our communities, having access to good transportation that's affordable, being able to live in our community that we work in, and instead of getting pushed out or being ignored and not listened to. That's what actually makes us healthy. It helps our mental health and our physical health when we're not chronically living in poverty or chronically stressed and worried. So for me, I think that my biggest challenge will be to try to condense those points. I appreciate the interview and the opportunity to meet with you guys and to be able to give 3-minute answers. I think my biggest challenge is condensing it into the 30 seconds at the door or the 1 minute in a forum, because these issues are complex. And we can create solutions to the housing crisis, the homelessness crisis, the income inequality crisis that we see in our city. And it's going to take more than 30 seconds or 60 seconds, but I think working together and making sure that workers from Working Washington, advocates from Casa Latina, our small business progressive community from Main Street Alliance, people that we've worked with in the past to pass the policies that you mentioned at the beginning, making sure folks are at the table and being listened to. I think we can create answers to these problems, and I'm going to try to not bring my pie chart, but I think that the biggest challenge will be to condense it so that folks get to know me at the doors, and hopefully I will be able to win their support in November.
Well, speaking of 30-second or 60-second, when Dan, we're going to throw you for a little curveball.
I'm ready.
Next question is a 60-second question.
Okay.
You only get 60 seconds. So as you know, Working Washington does a lot of work with workers and workers' rights, but we're not a union.
Mm-hmm.
So question, labor unions, thing of the past or thing of the future?
Thing of the future. Yes. Oh, 60 seconds. Thanks. We can create the opportunity for folks to collectively bargain and have a collective voice in areas that have been non-traditionally or not traditionally organized. Look at what's happening right now with Uber and Lyft drivers. Look at the conversation we just had about domestic workers. Look at the massive movement that took place with fast food workers who exercise their rights. It might not be a traditional labor, with the alphabet soup that we've seen in the past, but we can create an organized movement together. This is about creating mass movement, organized people with a collective vision and collective focus. What the right wing wants us to do right now is to fight against each other, to fight over the scraps, to call names and to point fingers. We will not do that if we stick together. And so I think labor unions, worker advocacy groups, and workers standing united is a thing of the future, and that's what the new labor movement will look like.
Thanks for taking that curveball. It's actually it's a handwritten question from
I'm glad.
from just like 30 minutes ago. All right, well, this is coming to the end of the interview here. Is there anything else, you get 3 minutes, that you want the workers of the city to know before making their decision?
I'm incredibly humbled to be able to be interviewed and to have made it past the primary. We got about a third of the vote with some really incredible candidates running for office, and I look forward to having conversations not just in the next 8 weeks leading up to the November election, but hopefully if I win the city council position, the commitment that I made that this is an extension of my commitment to workers and my commitment to the labor movement is absolutely why I'm running. So for me, this is not about a headline or a name on a door. This is about how we create a Seattle that actually works for everyone, to make sure that we have a place that we can call home that is affordable in the city, so that we're not commuting 2 and 3 hours, which is bad for our health, it's bad for our environment, it's bad for our local economy. I have spent my entire life, you may know this, but my entire career standing up for and fighting for the most vulnerable. My first job right after undergrad out of UW was working at CMAR Community Health Centers, where I helped seniors who were coming in the door, who'd been pushed out of our city, who didn't have affordable housing, who were coming in the door looking for that plastic medical insurance card, but what they really needed was good, high-quality food, social cohesion, the ability to have stable housing. I went from there to work with the Department of Health, where we worked on safe routes to school, making sure that kiddos had good, healthy food in schools, and that people felt invested in terms of their health and in their community. And at the Children's Alliance, where I worked, I fought to make sure that every child had access to health insurance. And when I say every child, I mean every child, regardless of their immigration status. And it's not just about passing the legislation, because I came in the day the bill was being passed, but I fought for 3 years to make sure we actually kept that commitment, and that there was no questions asked about somebody's immigration status that would harm them later, and that there was no stigma associated with them coming through the door. And it has been a nationally renowned program. And now working in the labor movement and being able to be part of some of these amazing wins that Working Washington has been championing around secure scheduling and raising the minimum wage and sick leave, These are issues that I am so passionate about, but I recognize that they were born here in the city of Seattle. And if we want to continue to be the progressive city that we are so proud of, that we get a lot of credit for and we pat ourselves on the back, we have to have people on city council who are going to stand up, be firm, and know what it means to work with each other, to have good policies that will actually be implementable and not just bumper sticker solutions, right? So for me, this is about making sure that we can create a Seattle that does work for everyone, that workers have a place to live, that they have good quality jobs. And I think it's an extension of our commitment to make sure that we're standing up for the most vulnerable. And when we do that, businesses will be fine. They will survive because we create the wealth in this city. We create the prosperity. We created the wins that we're so proud of here in Seattle. And with your members' support on City Council, I think we can continue to lead the nation. Great. And see greater shared prosperity, because there's not enough right now.
Teresa Mosqueda, candidate for position 8, Seattle City Council. Thanks so much for coming down and interviewing with us.
Thank you.